Hi guys, we're going to go ahead and continue with this notes about our articles that we read. Here we had this interesting one about caffeine and skin cancer. Okay, there was actually three different articles I found on that same kind of topic. In fact, it was really interesting because I read at the bottom here it said, now researchers are looking to see if maybe caffeine should be added to sunscreen to increase its effectiveness against skin cancer. So interesting that they're looking at that to draw a conclusion. Okay. So let's go on. So what we found in our previous video when we did the placebo surgery article was that was an experiment. That was an experiment that had treatments, okay? This here was considered an observational study because and we'll talk about this actually in the next little video, the specific difference between experiment and observational study. But here we were just observing the results of people just already doing things and seeing, was there an association with types of skin cancer based on what they did naturally having that caffeine or not. Okay. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. And we're going to, I know that you might have filled in some of this. We're going to go down here to the definitions and kind of then come back up here and follow those up. Actually, we talked about the subjects or the experimental units and then the treatments and such. We kind of talked about that idea in the previous lesson. So let's take a look at that. All right. So the subjects in that first study, so I'm taking a look at that, remembering that. Okay, so in that study, they didn't give us specifics. I don't even think they used the word in adults. It did talk about women in that who drank more than 3 cups of coffee per day and men. So I'm just wondering, okay, is this just about adults in general? So let's see. Okay. All right. Now, this study number 2, when we read that, that one actually was specific and said that they took information from 110,000 people. Okay. So they specified that. The third one was interesting. It didn't ever really say, but because they seem to be making conclusions, it talked about doing it in mouse studies. It didn't really say, not so this was not specified, but it did discuss mice. So that was unclear. Okay. All right. Sorry to throw that kind of uncertainty at you. Now, what are the treatments? So this is interesting. I'm going to put down, I think, a better word actually. In fact, I think I'm going to fix this right now. A better word to use is not what are the treatments. I'm going to go ahead and cross that out right there. Not what are the treatments, but like what is the explanatory variable? What are they trying to attribute to the reason that you are having a response? Okay. And so we'll kind of talk about the ramifications of that here in a second. But so what is the explanatory variable? Okay. And so that is, what is it that they're attributing it to? Study 1. I think all of these were that same thing. So here, oh, look at that. So here on this one, of course, they were all the same. So the caffeinated coffee. Let's see. The third one was interesting. The third study said just caffeine in general. It did eventually mention caffeine in the coffee. Okay, caffeinated coffee. And this one talked about just caffeine in general. And then it also talked about caffeinated coffee. Okay. All right. Now, I didn't mention this, but it was interesting to talk about, say, what are the results or response? What response was it that they were measuring? Okay. So, what response was it that they were measuring? I'm going to cross this out right here. Okay. So the response that they were measuring was they were talking about skin cancer, and the people who got skin cancer. In fact, in this second one, I wanted to notate they went further. They were even more detailed and not just talking about skin cancer in general. In this one, the response was even more detailed. They were wanting to talk about the certain kinds of cancer: basal cell carcinoma, squamous cell, okay, and then melanoma. Okay, and the melanoma is the really, really bad type of skin cancer. Okay, so that was of interest to them because they thought, there are some different types of skin cancer. Let's see if it matters. Okay. All right. So then here we go. Does it appear as though coffee is the only variable contributing to the reduction in skin cancer? Okay. So that's interesting. What do you think about all these people? Do you think there's anything else that could be clouding the issue and making it look like there's a reduction in skin cancer? Well, they do actually mention it down here at the very bottom of the article. Okay, so down here in that last paragraph, they mention the doctor says that drinking the dose of caffeine may be more effective on days in which you're headed to the beach rather than any cumulative effects overall from coffee drinking. So here they're kind of bringing in that other idea of other things that could be contributing to that cancer, right? And that would be the sun exposure. Okay, so of course there's other things that can be contributing to skin cancer. Chemicals that you put on your body. Or even I always wonder what's worse, getting skin cancer or is the sunscreen got problems that it's causing me? Okay. What conclusions can be made from this results? Do you think that we have the right to say, based on this and based on the effect or the issue that sun exposure could be part of what's happening here? Do you think we can say those who drink coffee definitely have a less chance of having cancer? And the bottom line is, and we'll talk about this on the next notes, so it'll make the next notes go faster. We really can't. This is not a controlled experiment. There's other things at play here. We didn't just have that one explanatory variable of the caffeine. There were other things working here, like the sun exposure. Okay, so we really cannot claim cause and effect. And that's one of the things that we want to pay attention to when we do things. Do we have the right? So we've been talking about the right to who we can generalize. Well, in this case, we'll see in here is actually that next question. But in here, we also are going to add the component of who can we actually say cause and effect, or there was just some kind of relationship. All right, who do we think we can generalize these findings to? And remember how in the last lesson or last article we talked about really just to those volunteers. Okay, same thing kind of here, adults such as these. Okay, it seemed like they said that I don't remember if they stated that they randomly selected the adults. If they had randomly selected the adults from the population, then that would say, ooh, these people are like all of the adult population, whoever they sampled it from. And so then we could draw conclusions about all of the adult population. So, but it sounds like in some cases they were actually just looking at maybe some volunteers. So I don't know here. So adults such as these, and then it sounded like again in this study, were we talking about mice? We kind of don't know. All right. So some uncertainties, and I'm sorry about that with this, but that's going to happen more with your observational studies. Observational studies are not as definitive of results as what you would get with an experiment. And so those go together. So that was a natural kind of like uncertainty that was happening. All right, so let's define a couple of things here. So first, there are a couple different kinds of observational studies. Observational studies, of course, you are just observing already existing results. They did not say, hey, you people, you drink this much coffee, and then, hey, you people, you don't drink coffee at all, and then I'm going to go see what happens. No, they just observed already existing people and how much coffee they got and if they had eventually gotten skin cancer. Okay, so there's a couple ways you can go about that. If they did a retrospective study, then they would just look at past medical records. They would just say, ooh, they might ask you anecdotal evidence, which isn't necessarily scientifically great, and we'll talk about that. They might say, okay, how much on average, how many cups of coffee do you have in a day or a week? Okay. And then they would look maybe back at past medical records to see when you got the type of cancer that you got. Okay. Prospective, which is probably more likely what would happen in this case, is so they're going to identify their subjects first and then follow them through their natural behavior and see what happens. Okay. Another example, this could be kindergartners. Identifying kindergartners, follow them through their senior year. Okay. See which ones went into athletics, see which ones went into music, look at those grades and see if there's an association between the activity they went into and their grades, their GPA. Okay, so that would be identifying kindergartners first and then following them forward prospective. Okay, as opposed to looking at seniors and then looking back at their past grades and see how they did. Anecdotal evidence, so that's information that people have to just remember from personal accounts, not necessarily scientifically valid, okay, but it might give you some indication of where to investigate further. All right, these next two, not going to go much in depth. In fact, I think I might not even have you write down this vocab. You can if you want, but we have a whole lesson on confounding and lurking variables in the next lesson, so that will be separate, okay, so we won't even go into that. All right. So that is all of the things about the study. Now, the next idea, and I'm going to make a separate video, is the next thing we have to really talk about is what do we have the right to conclude? Can we conclude cause and effect or not? Okay. And then always, to whom can we make these conclusions about? Just like we've always been talking about that population of interest. Okay. So I'm going to do this next page, which is the scope of what we can say about these studies in a separate small little video. Okay. So that's your next one.